Hi. So today we're going to talk about why you shouldn't listen to your demos, or why I don't listen to my demos. Now I want you to take this with a grain of salt, because every rule that we make with music and art more generally is just something that acts more as fallback guidance rather than something you have to do. Nevertheless, it's something I've encountered over and over again with my music, and a conversation I've had repeatedly with other musicians who've encountered the same thing. A demo can mean a couple of different things depending on the genre and the level of production involvement of the artist or the group. If you're predominantly a beat maker or an electronic music producer, then the demo in this context isn't separate from the final product. And by that I mean you'll continue refining it within your DAW, your MPC or your sequencer until it reaches the final fully produced version. You could be the complete opposite of that, where you're recording something with maybe just 2 mics or maybe even just a phone recording, and then when you're satisfied with the song structure and the lyrics, etc., you'll then take that into a studio to record professionally. So there's not so much of a third option, there's more of a spectrum in between the two. So in the case of my music, I produce everything myself in Logic. And at any one time there'll be a mix of either programmed drums or recorded drums, VST synths or synths that I've recorded and I've completely committed to, guide vocals, final vocals, like a massive mix. Most of it's recorded at home or in my studio/rehearsal space, but sometimes I'll have to go into a studio to record something I can't do myself, whether that's an instrument I don't have, or if there's a musician playing a part that I can't play myself, or an instrument that I don't play myself. Now you might sit anywhere on that spectrum, but there is one special little disease that affects all of us no matter where we are, and that is a little guy called DEMO-ITIS. DEMO-ITIS is what happens when you become so familiar with the sound of your demo or your 4-bar loop that you lose the ability to make objective judgments of your music. So even though, as I said, there's a spectrum of music making and I will be jumping around a bit, hopefully this reasoning will apply to you no matter what kind of music making you're doing. The beat makers and electronic music producers might take something from the people doing band and songwriter stuff, and vice versa. So firstly, I'm going to talk about some problems, and then I'm going to talk about some solutions. And I'm going to divide it into 2 areas. The first area I'm going to call composition. That's the harmonic, melodic, rhythmic, and lyrical aspects of a piece. And the second I'm going to loosely call production, and that covers the actual recording, tones, samples, mix, mastering, etc. There's so much nuance here depending on genre, but hopefully you'll see a through line that connects everything together. Now before we go on, I just want to put this caveat up front. If you're an artist who is either new or doesn't yet have the technical recording production experience that I'll be discussing, or if there's anything physically, mentally, or financially in the way of making something sound better, which is completely subjective, the last thing I want to do is stop you from expressing your artistry at this stage. Not all of us are lucky enough to be able to own or have the time to use expensive gear, or be able to pay for studio time. And to be honest, owning expensive gear and going to record in expensive studios really does not equal making good music. So please don't see this as discouragement from making and releasing music from exactly where you are now. See it more as a toolkit that might help you if you get stuck. So first, let's look at some issues with composition. There's so many memes about producers getting stuck on their 4-bar or their 8-bar loop, or showing your loop to other people and never progressing beyond that. And that's because the meme is true. It's so easy to have an initial idea, put the loop regions on, listen to it, vibe out on it, bounce it out, put it on SoundCloud, put it in your headphones and listen to like 10 minutes of that loop. But this is where we run into trouble. The more you listen to that 8-bar loop or that 4-bar loop, the more you're training your brain that this is how this piece of music sounds. At the end of those 4 bars or 8 bars, trying to take it anywhere else feels paralyzing because you've baked in the expectation of what the next section sounds like. In your brain, it needs to sound exactly like the beginning of that loop. Now, I totally get that depending on the genre, a song or piece can be based off one rhythmic or harmonic idea, but even making subtle changes like maybe dropping a 1 or adding in a pad or changing up a hi-hat pattern can sound really off if you've hammered that loop into your head enough. Now the same thing can happen across genres. even with fully fleshed out sections, a chorus, verse, middle eight, intro, outro, etc. The more you listen to that demo, the more you can unwittingly be setting that version in stone, making it harder for yourself to deviate from it and make decisions about where it should go. Now, we've run into a whole new set of problems when it comes to the production side of things. Where I've experienced this the most is with band demos. This is where a roughly recorded demo, when there's maybe one microphone in the room, sounds better and more vibey than the professionally recorded vinyl product. There are three main reasons for this. The first is performance, the second is distortion, and the third is kind of a combination of the two. So first is performance, and this also breaks down into a couple of areas. Frequently, a band in a practice room are not playing to a click track, which means there's going to be subtle variations of speed across the recording. So they might be going a bit faster for the chorus and a bit slower for the verse. And in a lot of cases, there's going to be a gradual speed up throughout the song. This then makes that demo recording feel more exciting and more urgent than when they go into a studio and record it to a click track. And not having the pressure of perfection in the studio, we're paying for this time, we've got to get it right, can result in a looser, more natural and relaxed performance. On the distortion side of things, if it's just one mic in a room, and this is frequently going to be maybe just a phone mic or an SM58 plugged into a Scarlett, the sound's probably going to be hitting that mic pretty hard. And this is going to result in some distortion and saturation on the recording. And even though that results in a lower quality or lower fidelity recording, there's a harmonic quality to it that our ears will find exciting. And this is where the third point comes in. Everyone playing in the room together, especially when recorded on something like an iPhone or a camera or maybe even a GoPro, there's going to be compression on that microphone as well, which means all those exciting, gnarly frequencies are going to be really glued together and potentially sound more fun to the ear than a cleaner professional recording. And we can all agree that saturation and distortion sounds fun. That's why everyone and their dog is making saturation plugins and we're all buying them. Now obviously there's nuance here. A good producer should really be able to tell if it's actually appropriate for a band to record without a click, or if they should all be tracking together, and then make a judgment call on how much bleed and separation there wants to be with amps and drum kit in the room, because that scrappy demo might actually be the North Star for how recordings of this group should sound. But nevertheless, the more you listen to that one mic scrappy recording, the more your brain is going to tell you that's how this song sounds. And you're going to be less and less able to make clear and objective decisions and judgments when it comes to making new recordings for a wider audience. There's a reasonably similar phenomenon for electronic/beatmaker music.
Crank the bass up as hard as you can.
Put a saturation plug-in on everything, put L2 or Pro L2 on the master, then export a waveform that looks like a brick, play it to your friends, and then when you go back to do some more nuanced production on it, and take that stuff away, it just doesn't sound as exciting to listen to. These are what I see as the main problems. Let's have a look at some solutions. Now, as with the problems, some of these will be more appropriate to bands, songwriters, and some more appropriate to beat makers, producers, but hopefully there'll be some crossover in between. Now, whatever you're doing, the main principle is only listen to your music when you're working on it. I repeat, only listen to your music when you are working on it. What does that mean? If your music exists principally within the context of your DAW, your sampler, your sequencer, don't bounce it out. Listen to it when you've got the project open, and then when you close it, don't listen to it again until you open that project again, which means you will keep it in a constant state of non-commitment. The only time you should bounce it out is if you need to get some feedback on it, or if it's part of an EP or an album and you need to see how the tunes flow into each other. But even in that case, try to only listen to it within that critical context. Don't reward yourself by listening to something that isn't finished yet. If you're in the mix/master process, of course you've got to bounce it out and listen to it on different systems. But if you're doing that, just keep it to the critical assessment of how it functions in an almost technical sense on those different systems. And even when you're listening to it in your DAW, etc., try not to play it unless it's absolutely necessary, Obviously, if you're working out a vocal line or a guitar solo, or if you just need to listen to the end of a bar to figure out what the next section is going to be. You're trying to make each listen as part of an iterative process so that it doesn't take its final form until it has to. For songwriters or bands, where the production element acts as a secondary support to the song, melody, chord progression, etc., the concept and process is pretty similar, but in a more analog setting. Work on your song with your instrument either in or under your hands, with a pen, a phone, or a laptop ready to make notes or do reference recordings. That means every playthrough is going to be subtly different, and there is always an immediate possibility for variation and new ideas. If you're not an instrumentalist, use something like iReal Pro to make quick MIDI chord progressions, or do voice recordings of the root notes or the rhythms to sing over. Whenever I'm writing lyrics to something, even if I've got a well-produced version of the song, I always make MIDI chord progressions in iReal Pro because it gives me most of the harmonic information that I need and doesn't risk me overplaying and fatiguing my ear for the actual produced track. Obviously, reference your produced version if you need to, but don't become reliant on it. Don't be like, oh, I'm bored, I'm just gonna vibe out on that chorus again. Alright, I'm going to give you a couple of SOS things to do where maybe you've gone too far down the rabbit hole with your demo recording and you really need to shake things up. For producers and beat makers, try doing this. Replace all your samples and synth sounds with stuff that you find objectively bad, like go full RZA on it. And only listen to that version for a couple of days, and then when the palette's been cleansed, come back to it and rebuild it from scratch. This next thing is applicable across the arts, but we're going to focus on the musical application of it now. So if you're stuck on your 4-bar loop, or you're a band, songwriter, etc., and either you don't know what your next section wants to be, or you're not happy with one of your existing sections, try doing this. Write the shit version. All it has to be is something that fills that space. You could either find that this new thing you've written works, or it can give you a really good jumping off point for writing something that does actually work. Having something to iterate from is so much easier than having just blank space. The same thing works if you're trying to replace a section. If you don't like your chorus, get rid of it and then write a new chorus. That new chorus could be the one, or you could realize, oh wait, no, that chorus I already had was great. I needed to take it out to realize how good it was. Now, an important thing with this is just focus on it being shit. And the reason I say shit and not you trying to make something good is that it takes away the pressure of writing something good. You can write it as a joke, and that's fine, because it's going to give you something to jump off from. So look, some of this might have been helpful, you might disagree with all of it, but as I said, please take it with a pinch of salt. Everyone's different in their music making, but I do think there are some universal experiences that it's good to have in the back of your mind for whenever you're feeling a bit stuck. Unlike what that fucking cunt from Suno says.
It's not really enjoyable to make music now. I think the majority of people don't enjoy the majority of the time they spend making music.
Making peace with and navigating the frustrations of creating art is one of the most rewarding parts of it. And to get a little bit meta for a second, our artistry is an extension of ourselves. We're in constant dialogue with that. So the last thing you want to do is wear out that dialogue by telling the same story over and over again. And in the context of this, it's listening to that same piece of music over and over again until we've kind of worn it out in our mind, or we're not leaving room for it to develop and change. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you got your own techniques for dealing with this? If you do, then please leave them in the comments, because everyone's different. The things that help me might not help you, but there could be someone who sees your technique and it works perfectly for them. And if you did find this helpful, please go to Bandcamp, purchase my music, follow me in the places, subscribe, all that stuff. Goodbye.